Here comes the best, the most well-rounded, best-smelling, nothing off-limits podcast in the world. Welcome to Quadcast with Kortney Olson, the woman with the world's deadliest thighs. Let's get ready to mumble!
Can't win a single vote. Yeah. To me, it's just that it's an easy target to get people riled up and say, yeah them.
But yeah, let's talk about bathrooms and trans women in bathrooms and make up an issue that's literally never happened. There is literally more U.S. senators and congressmen that have been charged with sexual crimes in the bathroom than trans women. Like, it just isn't even a thing, but yet you throw it out there and people pops in people's head, oh my God, I'm worried about my kids. We need to get these weirdos out of here. But it's literally 100% lies.
Yeah.
What,
What do you say about like the prisons? And again, this is me getting caught in the vortex. And they have previous. So that's where it gets tricky, right? Because you see people. People see a system they can take advantage of. They can take advantage of it. And it's like, where do you draw the line between like you being me saying, "Oh, quote," like nobody can say somebody else is an alcoholic. You need to say that yourself. So in terms of like a trans person, I can't say, "Oh, they're a true trans person," and they're not a true trans person. But
I don't really know if that's an issue where we have lots of people claiming to be trans to try to get out of men's prisons. But how do you differentiate between, an actual transgender woman who you send into a male prison, they're going to be nothing but rape fodder for the whole entire time they're there.
Never thought about that once.
Imagine sticking a woman in a men's prison. Oh my gosh, like that's going to be, a horrible fate for sure. But then the issue of, okay, so how do we determine who's trans, who isn't? What about someone who says they're non-binary? What about somebody who's gender fluid? Like, where do they go? That's a complicated question. I don't know that there's an easy answer for that.
And that's okay. And that's like what's so cool. It's like we don't fucking know. And as time goes on, but again, the fact that we're having this conversation and giving people an opportunity to be aware of, you're so much more eloquent.
No, it's a conversation that I wish the whole world could have, because
it's a conversation that needs to be had, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, we've got. Like, if you want to talk about jail, I don't mean to just take Janae's side, but I seem to be doing that a lot. But with your jail system's fucked, right? And look at your brother, your jail system's fucked. And it was designed, I don't think design is even a word, but it was designed for like the 17th century. And some of these concepts weren't thought about. It's okay to change the system.
Yeah. I think most people would acknowledge that the U.S. prison system's horrible.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It's not about rehab. It's not about anything. And it's just, there's just a million things wrong with our system.
It's a moneymaker.
Anytime you mix that stuff with business. When there's been judges that have found to have a financial vested interest in the prison they're sending people to, how does this happen?
Right?
How is this
it's
even
so
a thing?
Ridiculous.
And, we could go, that's a whole other topic and we could spend hours on just talking about that.
Right.
But the thing is, when I try to keep in mind, human beings, number one, are incredibly complex and varied. So the idea that we all fit neatly into two boxes, I think, is absurd. And the idea, and something I wanted to mention earlier that we had come up when we were talking about it, but like this rise, and this is this is perpetuating this idea that people are forcing people to be trans or tricking them into it, or peer pressure is forcing these young kids to identify now as trans or non-binary. I think a lot of what's going on is that a lot of people don't fit neatly in one box, and so they're recognizing, like, when I grew up, that wasn't an option. You boy, girl, that's the only two things you had, and I never felt comfortable in there, but I had no choice. And now that the idea, like, people see all these other people, and they're like, well, you know what, maybe that feels right for me. And some of these people are going to figure out that maybe it doesn't. Like, maybe they'll identify as non-binary for a few years and be like, yeah, you know what, not really my thing. But then other people will be like, yeah, I feel this makes a lot more sense to me. I never really... I know so many people that, when I was told, like, when we were kids and getting the boys line and the girls line, like, I was confused. I didn't know, like, I looked at both lines and said, I don't fit in either of those. And I think there's a lot of people that, to differing degrees, fall in different places, and it really is a spectrum. And I know some people are, oh, that's nonsense. This is the brainwashing. But like I said, just think about it. Think about all the women you know and all the men you know. There is more, I'll try to make this as clear as I can, but there's more variation within if you want to say male and female genders, there's more variation within one gender than there is a difference between the average of the two. So if you think about the most masculine woman you've ever met, the most feminine woman you've ever met, there's going to be a greater gap between them, and the same thing with the most feminine man you've ever met and the most masculine man you've ever met. There's going to be a much greater gap in between those than the average male and the average female. This idea that we're all like, all women are, this pretty little prissy princess and all these guys are, John Rambo, that's not reality. And there's nothing wrong. And what I don't really like is that there's value assigned to all this, right? Like, if you're a manly man, you're seen as more valuable by society. It's what everybody, and you've got guys like Andrew Tate and other people preaching this, man's man, alpha, sigma male, and whatever other name they're coming up with now.
My dad was great because he used to beat my mum.
Yeah. And it's like, and it just, but all this, and I understand some of this too is that in the way they recruit people or bring them into this is these people feel attacked. They feel like, oh my gosh, they're fighting against us and we feel threatened. So now we're going to identify with somebody who's championing our cause, which even if it's something totally nuts. And so it's how we're alienating certain groups, and instead of just sitting down and saying, hey, look, we're all human beings first. And let's figure out how do we get along? How does everybody just respect each other, treat each other with respect and dignity, and allow room for people to be themselves?
Yeah,
that was a terrific point. Because I know you're massively visual. I think the idea was if you've got the gap between men, this is the men and women divide here, and you got average woman, average man, the gap there versus the most
someone like myself
masculine and the most masculine. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think the other thing I wanted to ask you too was about not putting the idea out there, because and I don't know what's real and what's not in terms of the education and kids identifying as cats and eating a fucking cat litter box.
You hear those stories. Is this really going
right?
on?
It's what's fucking really happening here? And thinking well, shouldn't these kids be playing wiffle ball and you know what I mean, instead of being here's all these how many ever genders there are now, and
I don't,
it's I'm are we, because again I'm saying if this is 1% of the population, but then maybe it's not.
It's definitely not 1%. And here's the thing. There was some statistics I looked at a long time ago, and I can't remember them perfectly off the top of my head, but there was a large study done where they did I believe it was a meta-analysis of a bunch of, but they looked at all the births of intersex people from these large hospital systems over it was a 20-year period or something, and they found out it was way more because nobody talks about it. Nobody, what's the first question anybody asks is, do you have a boy or girl? Why is that so important? Why is our society so obsessed that the most important thing, now the gender reveal parties, why does it, it tells you how important gender is seen in our society, and how, a dad's so excited when he finds out his first child's a boy. And, and then, or somebody really wanted a girl. Why does that matter so much? Why not just have a child you love? Why do they have to be, why does it have to be one gender or the other? And what do you, and then two, what expectations are you placing on this child? If you're this dad who wants this boy to be just like you, what happens if he's not? What happens if he's not? What if he does like to play with dolls? What if he likes makeup? So are you going to punish this child and make them be something they're not? And so
that works out real well, as we know.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, how many times have we seen the conversion therapy counselor, 2 weeks later they're in the gay bar hooking up, and it's just, but I would love to see a world where everybody can just be themselves regardless of what that is, and they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be propped up on a pedestal for being one or another, and they're not going to be hated and dehumanized for being something else. And just let everybody be free to be themselves. I think the idea that clothes have a gender and stuff is ridiculous, and and it's.
Well, we can't agree with that, can we?
Took me a minute. I was like, "Where's he going with this?" Oh, we have a clothing company.
Yeah, cool girl.
Call girl.
1 in 50 is the current estimate of children born into gender.
Okay, so that would be 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's just intersex conditions. Trans people, I think, anytime somebody talking about this, it's not possible to know. We have so many people. Number one, like I said, a huge part of the trans community is living in stealth. And the younger generation is much more okay with being out, but there are a ton of people, millions of people living in stealth that no one knows they're trans, where they live their everyday lives. And then there's a ton of people that are still closeted. I still get messages every day on social media from people telling me like, oh my gosh, I want, so bad I want to come out, but I know I can't. I know I'll lose my family. My parents would never speak to me again. Kids that are, told parents, I had a young Marine contact me telling me that his parents, like he had kind of hinted around about being trans, and they flat out told him, if you're going to tell us something like about this, don't, because we'll never speak to you again.
That's so.
I don't mean to be socialist about it, but it's like, it's why they have to bring sport into their agenda, because that idea that everybody can be who they want to be and love who they want to love, and that's how it should be. Everybody's kind of comfortable with that. Like, it's changed a lot in the last 20 years, but we've kind of gotten used to gay marriage, and all of those things have become legal. So you can't just say with your agenda that transgender people are bad, because we're like, no, we're past that. So you have to pick a subject that people can get upset about, which is sport and children.
I spend a lot of time listening to detransitioners' stories as well. And so I was curious what your thoughts are on that.
So here's the reality of that. That's another thing that's been greatly exaggerated for political means. So do people transition? Absolutely. Does it happen? Were some people very unhappy? Yes. The reality is it's a very small percentage. The most recent accurate statistics that I could find, it was something like 97.8 or 97.5% of people that transition are extremely happy they did. We'll tell you life has gotten way better. And so say 2.5% of people detransition. Now, the other thing that no one talks about is a large percentage of those people, when asked, will tell you the reason they transitioned isn't because they're not trans. It's because their life got so difficult. They were alienated by their entire families. They lost employment. They were kicked out of their housing. All these things happened. And they're like, this just isn't worth it. So I'm going to go back, because life, unfortunately, even though I was living a lie, it was a better lie than what I'm living now. So that's a big part of the detransitioners. And here's the other thing is that I don't know if I've really ever heard anybody touch on this. But here's a big problem with why some people detransition too, is because why we have this very binary system. So it's somebody who probably transition wasn't the right move for them, but they're not an average guy or an average girl either. So it's like they realized they didn't really fit where they were at, but then realized they went through all this. Well, that wasn't it either. And the reality is they're probably somewhere in the middle, but you only gave them two options. And that actually happened to me when I first went into therapy. And for people who don't know too, this whole idea of kids being put on hormones and you just go in and all this stuff.
Yeah, of course. I had that question for you too.
Yeah, we can get to that too. Okay. But it's not that easy. There's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through. So in order to have, what some people refer to as bottom surgery or gender confirmation surgery. So let's say I want to, get my vagina, and I need two therapists to sign off on papers that I have seen them, been counseled, and they agree that my gender dysphoria is severe enough to where this is the right move for me, and then before a surgeon will even touch you. No surgeon will touch you without these two letters. And in order to do that, you have to not only see these therapists, but have their recommendations, so they have to be convinced that surgery is the right movement for you. And the thing is too, like with me, I wanted hormones, and you can't get that without a letter either, and at least not through legal means. And
I wonder if that varies state by state, though.
It may. The surgery thing is universal, at least for U.S. citizens, and I think most surgeons. I've looked at surgery in Thailand and all over the place, and even they still want the two letters, and some of them in some places. They'll want you to bring one letter from your therapist, and they're going to have their own therapist interview you and see if they still think it's a good idea. But so there's lots of hoops you have to jump through. But the thing is when I went into therapy, you're only presented with one or two categories. I was afraid to say okay, yes, I know, I've been thinking about this since I was 4 or 5 years old. This is something that has been overwhelming for me. Things it affected my life in so many ways. I never went to a prom. I never went to a Christmas dance. I couldn't bring myself to put on a tux and go to a dance like that. It just felt so uncomfortable. It filled me with so much anxiety. I wanted to be in the beautiful prom gown, but I couldn't tell anybody that. And I just would make lame excuses about why I wasn't going. I'm like, oh, prom's stupid. Who wants to go to that? Like blah, blah, blah. But I never did. There's so many things in life I didn't participate in. Dating was extremely difficult for me because even though I was attracted to women, I didn't feel comfortable playing a traditionally masculine role. And so that it just always weirded me out. It made me super anxious, and I didn't know how to do that. Like
I can imagine us going out. I'm like, you open the door, and I'm like, shit, who do I? Because I'm masculine in a sense where I like to open the door for people, or then I'm like, will you take out the trash? But I was like, do I let Janae go first, or do I go, or is that rude if I cut in front? Like you start thinking about how we're so conditioned.
There's so many things in society that are deemed, gendered, but a lot of it for me was just, like girls expecting me to take the lead in so many areas, and especially when it came to intimacy and all this stuff, it made me completely uncomfortable, and I was very uncomfortable with my body. Now I was fine being muscular and athletic, and like people were like, yeah, but you played sports all your life, and you seemed really comfortable there, and you were comfortable in the rings. Yeah, I was naturally competitive, loved all sports, and loved that environment. But there were so many other places, and again, I would argue that's not a masculine or feminine thing. There's lots of women who love sports just as much as I do,
and that's why I can't say shit.
Yeah,
right? Because I'm like, then that's where I got so twisted up. Because remember, I told you, and just so our listeners, so y'all can get a background if you hadn't heard me talk about this story, but I competed with a transgender woman, and I think I told you it was 2014, give or take. And it was an Australian girls in gi competition, and we were pound for pound, skill for skill. We couldn't submit each other. And then after the fact, like an hour had gone by, and Jess Frazier, who had started the organization, said, yeah, so-and-so, I can't remember her name now, I think it was Bridget, is trans. And I was like, what? Like, what does that mean? Because 1999 had been a long time, And I was like, well, what does that mean? And she's like, oh, she's a transgender woman. And I was like, and I didn't ask questions about like had they had surgery or hormones, because I just but at that point I thought, my gosh, how interesting. Had I known that prior to competing, what would the outcome have been? How would that have impacted my performance, right? And I've always believed in so my favorite quote is Henry Ford: whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're right. So if beliefs control everything, and we're potentially living in a fucking simulation, according to the BBC. Right?
That rocked my world this morning.
Yeah. Well, we could say that for another episode, I suppose. But yeah, it was like, all right, well, then that means that it's open to interpretation. And here I am. I see a lot of men, not Dave. Dave is a very different story in terms of how we met in our...
We've already done that one.
We've already done that interview.
Yeah.
It's actually, I started attempting to make a docuseries around this with my side hustle, the wrestling stuff.
Yeah.
Because you get propositioned all the time, so you get it. Yeah, you understand. And I'm sure a lot of the times they're straight men, married with kids.
Almost always.
Right.
Almost always.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
that part.
And that's another thing. Oh, gosh, we just opened up a whole other can of worms. But like, yeah, as soon as
get you a fan.
As soon as I, came out as trans, all my social media was flooded with dick pics and propositions and people wanting me to wrestle them and squeeze them and pick them up and do all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And what it tells you, the thing is I saw some statistics recently too that transgender porn was the third most popular type of porn on the internet. And so and the thing is, those people don't understand.
Fastest growing.
Yeah, fastest growing. And then the thing people don't understand is that the vast majority of the people interested in trans porn identify as straight males. And it's just this whole idea, yet transgender women, like, as a trans woman, especially if you're very pretty and attractive, you have lots and lots of people that want to have sex with you and very few that are willing to date you. So everybody is, like, not everybody, but a lot of people are interested in you, but they don't want anybody to know that. So it's like, they want to hook up in private. They want to meet you at a hotel. They don't, they want to have sex with you, but they're not taking you home to mom.
Right,
and
right.
Why? Because they don't want to lose their straight card.
Right.
They are so afraid of being judged that, if anyone finds out, well, oh my gosh, I'm with a trans girl, so that must mean somehow, in a twisted way, I'm attracted to this very feminine person, but somehow that means I'm gay. because they, born as, however you want to say it, as, XY chromosomes. So it's all and obviously it's led in many cases to violence to the point of the trans woman being murdered.
Right.
And what, in the story you hear is that, I was tricked. I didn't know she was trans. But you didn't figure this out until after you had sex with her. Like the reality is they pursue these trans women, do everything they can to get them in the bed and have sex with them. And then in a lot of these cases, after they have sex and they come down, then they're like, oh my gosh, what if somebody finds out?
Right.
And then they freak out to such a point that they murder the woman. And then they claim, she tricked me, I never knew.
That's so
And it's happened so many
wild.
times. And like I said, if I opened up my DMs, I've deleted a ton of them, but it's not hard to find. Like,
right.
And then I've tried out a few trans dating sites, and what happens inevitably is they're overrun with straight males.
Wow.
Like you hardly even get to talk to any other girls because it's just guys hitting you up nonstop. Like I've never been so popular on a dating site. Like literally opened up one profile on a trans exclusive dating site, and in the first couple of days I had hundreds of messages, almost all from straight men, and all wanting to, hey, where can we meet? When can we meet? And straight to sex. And
yeah.
And but yet, do you think anybody in their life has any idea they're into trans girls? Nope, they're super secretive about it.
Yeah.
And most of these guys are married and have families. But yeah, so it's so sad that not only are there all these trans girls out there that would love to be in a healthy, loving relationship, they can't find a partner because so many people that would otherwise would be very much interested in them are too terrified of how they're going to be judged to actually pursue those relationships. And so there's just lots of people that would be fulfilled in a relationship with a trans woman but will never have it because they're afraid of being judged, and all these trans girls who can't find anyone because they're afraid of how they're going to be seen.
That's exactly
and it's just
right.
super sad. So instead, everybody wants to have sex with you, and very few people want to take you home to mom.
Right.
And
it's exactly like with the situation with the wrestling stuff. It's like all these men, typically there's some that are like very loud and proud about their love of muscular women, but come and because I'd always ask, I'm like, how did you get into this? Like, what's the dynamic here? Because I'm quite curious. A lot of women are into it just for the money, but I being a people person, I was like, I want to figure this out, and at the same time look at my obsession with being muscular, right? But with these men, a lot of times it would turn into like a therapy session, because I'm like, you understand, like you're born into this box, you have to act like a man, you're the breadwinner, you cry, you're a little bitch, you're on, and it's like, so you get to come for an hour and be on the other side of the coin where there's a strong, powerful woman dominating you. I'm not a dominatrix. I suck at that. I don't like hurting people. I can't even talk trash. Somebody was like, can you race degrade me? I'm like, hell no. Fuck no.
Please record it.
Yeah, right. Can I get a custom clip? I don't think so. But, to look at that gender dynamic. So again, that has also played a big part in me, looking at these stereotypes. But then I go back to, again, with the conspiracy shit, they, one of the very first videos I saw was Aaron Russo. Wow, shocked I remembered his name. He was a director. I think he directed, what was the one where one guy was blind and one was deaf? You could Google it while I'm sitting here.
Richard Pryor and See No Evil.
Maybe Hear No Evil.
Yeah. Maybe Google Aaron Russo. I could be totally wrong. Okay. But he was a director. He, I think, managed Bette Midler and well known. And he was approached by one of the Rockefellers and basically was cluing him into what was to come with 9/11. And, this power. He's like, why? You guys have all the money you need. Like, you're the wealthiest family in the world. Like, what's the deal here? And it was just about the power and the control and so on and so forth. And he said, yeah. And then in this conversation, he told me that they were the ones that started feminism. So encouraging these groups of women to go out and hold these rallies to break up the nuclear family. So now there's two parties to tax, not just the father, but now we got the father and the mother. And then the children becomes property of the state. And so then they're put through, the indoctrination and how schools are built like jails, and I pledge allegiance to the flag, and you go to the bathroom on a bell, and, you've got your hard curriculum that, like we said, nobody fits into a box. So then that shit starts, and I'm like, what is it? The fuck is going on? What the fuck?
Yeah, I guess maybe that's from these rumors I've heard about that trans people are a CIA plot to. I think
I haven't heard that one yet.
Don't quote me. It might have come from Alex Jones, but I don't know that for 100%, so don't quote me. But yeah, I was talking about how the trans people were a CIA plot to destroy the nuclear family, and that's But then you got my attachment to the Clintons.
I mean, fuck.
I'm busted. And,
did you go on Epstein's plane?
No idea what you're talking about. It's oh man, you get some of the stuff like I said. Get a little bit of truth mixed in with some crazy ideas, and
like you said,
go down a rabbit hole. And
Alex Jones, he said some things that have come true. Like you're
not. So then you point out things like I don't know if he was, but Gulf of Tonkin and some things were actually found out to be, they have a lot of truth, if not the whole truth about him. But he mixed some in, and
right. And we're all.
And because there's only two sides to any argument.
Yeah, and that nails it right there, right? Like even with transgender athletes, it's a perfect thing. It's a very nuanced conversation,
right?
It's a very I try to come at things from, let's look at this from a rational standpoint and break this down. What is actually going on? What results have we actually had? What have these women achieved? How far is it? Like where do they fit prior to transition, percentile wise in their gender? Where are they at? After percentile wise, how long did that take? What were their testosterone levels? Let's look at all this stuff. Is it actually fair? Or does this maybe the testosterone levels need to be lowered more?
Yeah.
Maybe, then there's a conversation about people transitioning later in life or transitioning earlier. We know that if you transition prior to fully going through puberty, that's going to greatly impact. You're never going to have those athletic gains that you would have had completing a male puberty. So that makes a big difference. But does that mean that someone who has gone through that and then they go on hormones, does that mean that they'll never reach a point? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And maybe there's outliers, like with everything else. It's like, you have some people, steroids are a perfect example. You can give two people the same doses of the same drugs. One person's going to grow a ton and get a ton stronger, and another one might barely have any gains at all. There's always outliers. And so maybe with trans women, maybe it's the same thing. Maybe we're going to have a couple women whose performance changes very mildly after, dropping their testosterone and increasing estrogen, or maybe not. But that's things we don't know. We need more studies over longer periods of time with greater sample sizes. And that's what we should be looking at this as is, from everything I've seen, and we look at all the data and everything, the studies that have been done and the results of the actual trans women, as of right now, no trans woman has exceeded the best of any woman in any sport in the entire world. So if there really was the advantage we're looking for, when we know there's high school boys all over the place that can exceed the best women's performance in a lot of sports, we haven't seen one trans woman be able to do the same thing. So that alone right there, in from my perspective, tells you that it's not the advantage that people think it is, or at least the way the media is making it out to be.
Right.
But is it fair? Well, that's a very nebulous thing too. What exactly is fair?
Right.
Like someone with castrosomania, people with intersex conditions.
Like, but
it's
you
a very
compete with
nuanced.
Men. And so when you compete with men,
Mm-hmm.
your reasoning behind that, is it because of your athletic performance?
So a couple reasons, and that's what I get asked that all the time. Well, you identify as trans, you prefer female pronouns, but you chose to continue to compete in the men's division. So a couple reasons. One, for me personally, I don't think it's fair, and this does not apply to all other trans athletes, but here's why. So first of all, you have to look at, I was number one in the world all time as a male when I left the sport of powerlifting. Not only was I the best in the world, that time I had exceeded what anybody had lifted in those 3 lifts in my weight class in history up to that point. And so obviously, like, if I had that kind of success as a male, you would expect I'd have the same kind of success as a female. But then also the big thing, the reason I think it's not fair is because I haven't stuck to the protocol of having your testosterone suppressed and solely estrogen therapy I just recently went over a year. And just to give you an idea, so at this point in my life, obviously I'm 50 years old now. I'm not anywhere near as strong as I was, 15 years ago when I was in my prime for powerlifting. But I was still, and I hadn't really focused on strength training in the way I did before. I'm trying to be more of a well-rounded athlete. Prior to going like exclusively on estrogen this last time, I was still benching. I could easily bench over 400 pounds, and then so after a year, and so my body, because I've had both my testicles removed, and the only testosterone my body makes is a small amount from the adrenal glands. And so my test levels, I can show you my blood work. My test levels like range between 5 and 12. Most women are, 25 to 50 or, somewhere in there. So my test levels are lower than what most women have.
And that's interesting because I thought I was like 1 to 9. I don't know if they're measured differently.
Well, there's a free and there's a free and a total. I'm speaking about total.
Right.
So and my total levels.
I can't remember. Mine's like 1, but I look at myself and I'm like, I am. We grappled today, and I was like, fuck, this a big bitch, I'm like sitting there, I'm like, got my frames in and shit. I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking let go. And I'm like, and I started thinking about it, and again, I'm like,
I think your testosterone's not 1, is it?
Yeah. Well, I think we're talking. Well, then there's free and there's total, and then there's also other factors that play in too.
But how much of it is mental? Because I'm in perimenopause.
Expectations are. I mean, and you can see this in sports all over. Not to get off on a total another tangent, different direction, but expectations play a huge role, right? So like. 1,000-pound deadlift is a great one. So the deadlift record was owned by Gary Heisey at 925 for almost a decade. And then it was, basically stuck there. No one was pulling more than that. Then you had Gary Frank, Andy Bolton, and Benedict Magnuson all chasing the deadlift record. It went from 925 to 1,000 over the span of a few years. It seemed like every time one of them did a meet, the deadlift record was getting bumped up. And then, so then it did that until it broke 1,000. And then it kind of stagnated there for a while. Well, now you've got it seems like everybody and their brother's pulling 900 now. And then 1,000, you've got small people pulling over 1,000 pounds. Have human bodies changed all that much in the last decade? No, but the expectations have. And I think in athletics, that's so huge. You see it like 4-minute mile.
Yeah,
like,
I was going to use the banister. Like, nobody could do it. Nobody could do it. As soon as he smashed it.
As soon as he showed it could be done, all of a sudden, boom, within the next couple of years, a whole bunch of people did it. What changed? Expectations.
Expectations,
beliefs,
Beliefs control everything.
100%. And
far out.
Yeah, so it's just, there's just so much to this conversation, and it's so nuanced, and I just think, like trying to boil this down into, A or B, it's not that simple. People aren't that simple, and no part of us is. But then the idea that, if we could just all, get the politics out of it, talk about everything as humans, and sit down and say, hey, what is the answer here? What's the best thing we can do? And that's where we need to start. But how do we get there?
You brought up so many good points today that have actually, I'm going to need to go back through and watch this and like write them down or pay somebody to transcribe it.
It's just, there's so much. Yeah,
it really is. And again, at the end of the day, we are souls having a human experience, right? So
probably not.
Oh yeah, we're in a simulation. Thanks
we're probably in a simulation.
I hope we're in a simulation because I want to hack that simulation and figure some things out.
For me, I want to be like, how can I get high and not pay the consequences and wreck my 6th Honda? Well, I don't have a Honda now. We have a Mini Cooper.
There's a parallel universe where you're hammered.
Yeah.
Wrecking Hondas. So you don't need to worry about it in this one. You don't need to do that in this one.
Yeah, the whole parallel universe, that's another fascinating thing, too. I'm like, so did other me transition in her teens? And like, what? Am I hot? How'd that turn out?
Okay, so how do we get you on Fox News talking about stuff, or Joe Rogan? But you'd mentioned Blair White. Like I started following Blair White, and I don't even know.
It's difficult because everybody has a bias, right? I have a bias, you have a bias, we all have our own bias. And I try really hard to think about that and think where I'm coming from and try to approach things as open-minded as possible. But even then, I still have a bias. But it's just like when we start talking about people and especially when you start talking about people with careers and making money, someone like Blair White, and so people aren't familiar with Blair White. So she's a transgender woman who transitioned when she was young, but ironically, she's against allowing trans people to transition young.
And she's so beautiful.
Yeah, very pretty, very feminine, and it was like she's the trans person that a lot of the conservative news networks and like organizations go to when they want a trans person that's going to uphold their narrative.
Right.
And so she's been on it, but she's had some conservatives treat her really, really terrible too. Like I've watched some interviews where they were just tearing her apart. One woman, I can't think of who it is, but this woman seemed as evil as they come. But she told Blair the best thing she could do was grow out her mustache and stop lying and like all this stuff. Like it was just horrible to her. Blair just sat there and took the whole thing and didn't say a word.
Wow.
And But yeah, like even like she was, she's had discussions with Ben Shapiro, and Ben had a hard time. He kept trying to use male pronouns and kept screwing. Like for him, he kept doing what he wasn't intending to do. It. Even he couldn't bring himself to constantly call her him. He kept, she, her, and then he's like, but being with her, he, recognized her as a woman, and it was hard for him to keep up that idea that trying to use male pronouns and stuff with her. But the thing about Blair White, so she's been on Rogan, she's been on a number of things, but unfortunately, Blair has been, and only Blair knows her true intentions. I can't be inside Blair's head and decide what her true intentions are, what she's doing, but at the very least, she's been found numerous times relaying false information about other trans people. And I mean, some people will say, hey, she's doing this for personal gain. She's sided with the right, the right and conservatives.
Is that like the lady that, the trans woman that wanted her balls waxed? And that was like, I think when I first came across Blair, and she sued because the beauty spa was like,
wouldn't do it or something.
Yeah, they're like, we're not going to do that. And then she got them shut down. And I think that's how this was like years ago. And I was like, what the fuck is going on?
So Blair definitely looks for all the trans people that are, stuff that she can exploit.
Right, just like we talked about earlier. There's some really shitty people who aren't trans. What's the fucking difference?
Yeah, there's good and bad in all of us, and every demographic has their great people and their not so great people.
Yeah.
And Blair wants to highlight all the trans people that really make the community look bad, and just in often cases has, whether it's through, she would say it's through her own, like, not doing well enough research. But the other people would argue it's specifically motivated and it's intentional. But like I said, only Blair knows the truth. But there's been numerous incidents where she's said a lot of stuff about people, gotten it very wrong. And actually, one of those was with me. She was talking about trans athletes and about, trans women smashing women in women's sports, and used me as a prime example of that. But fortunately, and a number of her followers also knew who I was, and they were like, hey, Blair, no, Janae has never competed in women's sports. It's been very clear she's never going to.
Yeah.
All of her records were set in men's divisions.
I actually tweeted that today. Riley Gaines has been somebody else I started following, right? The woman that, I guess she had tied with Leah, and then of course they, according to the story, because I wasn't there, right? They gave Leah the...
they tied fifth, and they only had one trophy, so they gave Leah the trophy because it looked
I thought
better.
They tied for first.
No, they tied for fifth.
Anyway, they gave Leah the trophy for photographic purposes or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's pretty shitty, but...
Yeah, right.
No, both girls got fifth. Share it.
Yeah.
Get two, figure something out.
Right.
But,
but they put, so she's been calling out, like this tweet was to Ronda Rousey, what do you think of biological males competing with women? And
that's part of the problem right there. Like the whole... How about, just say trans women competing with women. It's because like I said, if they're the same, then why, got high school boys can beat all the best women in the world. Why are no trans women doing that?
Right.
So but again, it's a bias. It's a narrative.
Right. It's a narrative. It's just like you said, it's complex. But nonetheless, somebody had, put a tweet saying, oh, yeah, Rhonda, this is my, younger sister, used to be brother or whatever, blah, blah, blah. They just joined wrestling. What do you say? And it was like, you were totally jacked. And it was a picture, I think I remember you posted on Instagram, because I was like hella jealous of your abs. I'm like, fucker. And no, I didn't do that, but I was definitely like, nice.
So somebody used,
your pictures, and I was like, for the record, this is the kindest, loving person who has served our country. She doesn't compete with men when she competes, for the record.
Women,
Thank you. Fuck it, just do away with it all. And that was the other thing too. I started getting all shitty when I read at some school, and some fifth grade school was getting rid of the terms female and male. And right, so like me going through perimenopause, and I'm like, well, fuck, what if, because we were never taught about this shit. And I'm like, what about all the women who are, suicidal? Because, like, it straight fucked me up. It started happening in 2018, because I've never had an issue with my period and sleeping. And then all of a sudden, bam, shit happened. It was March. I got my first bout of, like, horrific cramping. Like, it felt like a Mack truck drove straight into me. And ever since then, I like mood swings, and, I haven't gotten to, I've only had a few hot flashes, but I have, like, the night sweats and all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, we weren't even taught about our periods, but then we're like removing, the terms that equate to what happens with our body. So again, it's that nuanced, like, what the fuck? How do we navigate that shit?
How do we take care of everybody without? And it's just, Yeah, it's a really complicated thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The thing is, I don't think there's a simple answer, but certainly the things we're doing now is not working.
Right. And that we absolutely agree on. And that, again, like you said, this is a human issue.
Yeah.
And it's clearly an agenda. I mean, it got me whipped up into a frenzy.
Yeah, it's that's a sad part. I mean, propaganda and stuff's been around for how long? Probably as long as people have been around.
Right.
I mean, there is a guy from early 1900s that popularized it for I think political and other reasons, and I can't think of his name right now, but recognize that it's an effective tool, and it's scary that it's so easy to manipulate mass groups of people.
Right.
And but yeah, you throw them a little bit of stuff that upsets them and make them believe that it's the truth, and then you get that group, the mob mentality where everybody backs everybody, but yeah, it's just so many lies all the time. Like you said, like you saw my picture being used, somebody telling somebody that, this is their daughter on the wrestling team.
Right.
And then there was actually, I haven't even told you this yet, but just recently, I don't know if you heard, the whole thing with, obviously we had talked about, Anheuser-Busch and having Dylan on there, and that whole thing. Well, then DeSantis's group came back with a commercial. Did you see this commercial? So there's a commercial out there, and it's. Do you remember the old? I'm pretty sure it was the Bud Light commercials, "Real Men of Genius," and it was like all this had this corny music, and it was all about like rewarding the man for doing something that was totally average. So they did a spoof on that, and they did the Real Men of Women's Sports. And so it showed all these trans girls, and the whole narrative, the guy says, you were mediocre in the men's division, but you were able to switch to women, and now you're a champion, and like all this. Well, my images are used in that commercial, and here's me, someone as I think I'm actually the image they close with. And but I've never competed in women's sports. Have been very clear that I never plan to, and that like even with jiu-jitsu, I actually had to request to compete in the men's division because my IDs are all female.
Right.
And I had my birth certificate and everything changed, and so it's just, but it's stuff like that. Like in here, why did they pick me? Because they did a search for trans athletes.
Right.
Which ones look the craziest? Who's going to stir up the most emotion? Oh, there's Janae. She's big and jacked. The only good thing, at least they used a picture that I thought was nice, and I looked pretty in it. But
I love you for that. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's the thing is either they didn't do the research at all or they didn't give a shit.
Right.
And and it just happens so much, and then so many people are doing it for gain. It's like with Blair White, like is it an honest mistake? Is she just doing like, hey, I recognize that siding with the right's making me a lot of money, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yep. Yeah.
So.
She's certainly not alone in that, is she?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I mean, how many people sell out? Like, I mean, a lot of people do, right? Like, realize, like, well, this isn't exactly how I feel, but it's filling my bank account.
Right. Right. That's my mind's just blown apart. I'm like just looking at these notes, and we pretty much went over everything. I know that.
You were talking about menopause. I know we're way over time, but you were talking about menopause before. I think that the challenge with that is that there's a lot of people talking about trans women in sport, but the majority of what I see is men talking about trans women in sport. And if you think they give a fuck about your menopause. What they're trying to do is
women's sports.
All women's sports, right?
Yeah,
like
they're saying
where were you before? Yeah, how many were you
Yeah.
mentioning about Title 19 and all that kind of stuff? And it's just these guys don't give a shit about women's sports. They don't like trans women, so they're gonna throw a fit about it and justify that by saying, well, I want my daughters protected, or this is not fair to women. Like, okay, there's been a ton of issues with women's sports for a long time, and where were you then? You weren't saying anything.
Yeah, where were you then? And when you bring it back to menopause too, I think as a woman, or because I'm not a mother, right, and I don't have kids, so I can't speak on a lot of topics, but you think so I just got my back up over the whole like removal, and I had to sit and think about it, but changing the word mother to birthing person, and I'm like, women have been fucking second-class citizens for so long. Like, we couldn't get a loan or a mortgage in the 70s without our husband or our father, and we're
sorry, it's a joke.
Feel like we're making says the man who drives with his hazards on.
Yeah.
Both of you. I felt like again, it's just like, oh, taking something else away from us. But again, then that loops back into this whole conversation of gender norms in general when we're born, and like what path that puts kids down, and it's so like
and it's just and things too, like you're talking about, like with perimenopause and all those things. And then, well, what about the women that had hysterectomies in their 20s or 30s now? Like, because some people say, well, you can't have, trans women can't have babies or can't do this or that, so they're not real women. Well, what about a woman? There's other women I know that have been born with either a very small uterus or don't have one, or had to have it removed because of problems. So are they no longer women now? Do they not count? Like, where do you draw that line at?
Yeah, I saw that argument, but and I hate to say it because Matt Walsh seems like a peckerhead. I saw some footage of him talking to his pregnant wife, being such a dick.
It doesn't surprise
me. What an entitled
Yeah.
asshole. But I was listening to him debate, and he's like, well, it's no different than somebody who's born with one leg. It doesn't mean they're not human. It means something went wrong. So if you're
so trans people are a mistake.
I don't. How would you?
He was using that to assert that there are two genders.
And anything outside of that is a birth defect.
Yeah.
Is that where he was going with it?
Yeah, it's just like if you have one arm, everybody knows that you should have two. And it could be cancer, it could have been.
Yeah, that's a whole nother debate that you could get into, and the whole purpose of that argument is to support his agenda, and it's. I try to research everybody that's like whether I agree or disagree with their positions. Matt Walsh is a really hard one to listen to. I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff because it's like you're literally banging your head against the wall, being like, "Oh my gosh, how can I?"
He's a perfect example of somebody that doesn't give a fuck about women's rights.
Oh yeah, no. When his wife was pregnant and I saw that footage, I was immediately like, "All right, you're off." Like I will never listen to another.
Suits him to push this.
Yeah, I'm like, I'll never listen to another word you said. So I think in the 2 hours and 28 minutes we've talked, like we've pretty much covered everything that I had questions about, and you touched on stuff before I'd even gotten to ask it, like with the hormones and things.
Yeah, we could still go a lot deeper with that. There's still more to unpack there, but the short of it is, I guess what I want people to understand is, first of all, there isn't this mass, young children being put on hormones. That doesn't happen. Surgery doesn't happen. There may be one or two, like a couple isolated cases, but that is not how the process works. And it's a little more complicated. We don't have time to go into it right now, but again, it's like other things. It's been greatly exaggerated, but the sad part is what's happening now is that you're taking away the ability of doctors and people, first of all, people to govern their own bodies, and second of all, of doctors that are trained in this to make decisions to help these people. They're passing laws prohibiting this, which is going to do nothing, but research has shown us time and time again, it's going to increase the risk of depression and suicide. And you're going to force, imagine, it's the best way I can explain it. Imagine that, okay, so this is something that common happens, but nobody talks about it because, again, people want people to know. But a person very close to me, XY male, going through puberty, developed breasts. They had to have a double mastectomy. In one summer, they grew so much that it was quite obvious they couldn't take their shirt off. They had double mastectomy. No one is going to say, whoa, dude, that's your body. That's how God made you. What are you doing? How do you know you're not going to regret that? How do you know you really don't want those boobs? How do you know you're not going to want them 10 years from now? No one's questioning that. No one's saying, oh, no, that's totally, everybody like, of course, go ahead. But yet, if someone's saying, well, I'm trans and I don't want a beard. I don't want these changes to my body. I know all of this. Or it's a trans man. I know I don't want breasts and I don't want it. Now, you were putting them through this extremely traumatic period of their life where all these changes are happening in their body they don't want, and now they're going to have to go through surgeries, complicated and sometimes, potentially very risky surgeries to reverse all this stuff that could have been prevented in the first place.
And that's where I can't say shit, because right when you started talking about that, I was thinking, I met a woman who is married to a partner who runs all the strip clubs in San Francisco, and one of their top clients is a surgeon and does a majority of the trans surgeries, and was telling him that it's lucrative, and that's, a lot of the people have other issues they need to address first, but at the end of the day, when that popped into my head and you were speaking those words, I was like, that can fuck off, because this is lived experience.
Yeah, and
it's lived experience.
Yeah, and are there some trans people that there are? And this is another thing that plays into detransition and stuff too. There's a small percentage that think that being trans is the entire problem in their life, and if they fix that one thing, boom, their life's gonna be perfect afterwards. No, it fixed your gender dysphoria. It fixed the issues you have with your body, but it didn't fix any of the other problems you have, and you have to work hard to solve those. So there is a handful of people that do that and go through that and be like, wait, my whole life's not perfect now. What the fuck?
Right. And you mentioned it before too, which I never thought about because it's not the cyclone that I wound up down. But people do it, and then they find out their life is worse because they're abandoned by their family.
And that's super common. There's so many trans people I can tell you that. Well, my grandma disowned me. I
remember the documentary.
Yeah, I never spoke to her once I was out. I never spoke to her again the last how many years of her life. She just passed away now about 2 years ago at 93. But yeah, I never talked to her once I came out. And fortunately, I was an adult and very secure in who I was. But imagine if this had happened when I was in my teens.
Right.
I mean, you talk about having depression and suicidal thoughts already, and then your entire family kicks you to the street, won't talk to you, completely ostracizes you. Yeah, of course some people are gonna be like, this isn't worth it. And like I said, and are there a few people who detransition that it wasn't the right move for them? Yeah, but extremely, extremely rare. Like one quick stat, just to drive home the point, most everybody's familiar with LASIK surgery. LASIK, it's applauded as like a really good surgery. It has a super high success rate. Almost everyone's super happy with it. 95% success rate or satisfaction rate. Transition, 97 point something percent. So transition has a higher satisfaction rate than LASIK surgery, but no one's talking about that. No one's. Right. And you go on to YouTube, look at a video about detransitioning, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of views. Look at a video about successful transition, 10,000 maybe. Like everybody heard about this. Nobody's paying attention to that.
Right.
So it's like these couple stories
and that's again
getting recycled all over again, and thrown on all the conservative websites. You're not seeing an equal balance of both stories. You're not getting to hear both sides. You're only hearing about these couple cases. And then, of course, if you don't know any better, you're just like, oh, my God, it's ruining our children. Look at all these people with regrets. And no, are there some? Sure, but it's a very, very small portion.
I'm getting teary. It's so important to hear both sides. And it makes me sad that, like you had said, Dave told me, he's like, I'm concerned about your mental health. Like, your level of obsession over this isn't right. Like, and we only had that conversation a week ago. And I was like, well, that's why I reached out to Janae. Like, I know I need to do something. And it was almost like an addiction. Like, I'd get on because Twitter annoys me. But since they changed that interface to be like TikTok, where it's for you and then people you're following, it was just, I kept looking at it. And it like put me down that path, and like I truly believe, like I said, that their agenda is a one world government. I'm a fucking weirdo, and I truly believe that this is. I know Dave's sitting over here. Please shut up! Yeah. Don't burn our brand.
You're doing so well.
I truly think, like it's
only Americans can come up with the idea of a one world government because you think whatever. It's just America.
Yeah.
Anyway, point being, I was falling into their agenda and being divided and not. Yeah. I'm always come from a place of love. I fucking love people. Yeah. I'm a mediator. I'm much like you. Like, just let people be people. And again, I want you to have a closing word. I want you to have a closing word. But I feel like. Part of me was like, well, we didn't make a big deal of it when Prince wore heels and Bowie wore makeup. Like, what's the issue now? But I guess the issue now is, it's like, I guess, what is it? Like, let's close out on that.
First of all, this trans people are just the latest political tool, and that's a problem. We're not talking about the real outcomes and the real cost of all this and what really is best for everyone. It's, hey, here's a political weapon we can use, and that's why everything's being spun and everything's being twisted. And getting a bunch of people riled up about a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't exist. Like I said, like
mic drop.
Trans women predators, not a thing. Kids, having surgeries and transitioning at super young ages, not a thing. And then I guess the way I'd like to close everything up is just reminding everyone that first and foremost, we're all human beings. We're all complex. Everything's very nuanced. Anytime somebody starts speaking in absolutes like always or never, you're rarely are you ever going to be right. It's just things aren't that simple. Humans aren't that simple, and And for the Star Wars fans out there, just like Obi-Wan said, only the Sith speak in absolutes. So it's Star Wars fans will get that. Everybody else is be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, like I would just love to see a world, and I do think we're moving in the right direction. The one thing that gives me hope, because I speak at a lot of colleges and I speak to different age groups of people. And the difference between people of my generation or prior to my generation and how the younger groups are, there's because they've grown up in a world where they see trans people, non-binary, and all these different types of people, and they go to school with them and they interact with them and actually know people, that this kind of stuff is much less of an issue for them. And I think in the future these things will be like gay marriages now, and then like so many things in the past, women's rights and all those kind of things. In the future, we're going to get there where no one's going to care if somebody's trans. Maybe not no one, but very few people will.
Right.
And so I think ultimately we're heading in the right direction. But then again, whenever there's progress, there's always a hard pushback. And I think we're in that phase right now where the pushback is at before we finally move farther forward.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I can't top that.
You can't top that.
So I'll go on a tangent, but I think the important thing is to remember that the people in power want one thing, and that's power.
Yeah.
And that's all they're interested in. They don't give a fuck about human beings. They don't give a fuck about us and our prosperity and our happiness. United we stand, divided we fall. And we as the worker bees in an economy, they want us divided and focused on
that's why they've
whatever they want us to be.
Wiped out the middle class.
That's right. Yeah. So, it's like, remember that as humans, if we're all humans and we're all having conversations and we're all trying to aim for the right thing, which is allowing people to be what they want to be, who they want to be, and love who they want to love, then we'll be okay. And just don't trust the people in power.
Yep, 100%.
Janae, thank you so much for coming and sharing. And I know there's still tons to talk about. Who knows? Tomorrow we might wake up and say, fuck it. Like, let's just go another round. I almost asked you if I could, I don't know how I'd get a hold of her. I tried a few different ways, but wanted to make contact first, but see if I could get Riley and you in the same room, because I think that would be, that'd be an important conversation, because she seems, obviously she's passionate because she's had her lived experience, right? But at the same time, has never sat down with somebody like yourself, and her experience of going to San Francisco State University and getting basically harassed, and but like you said, things need to, like, the elevation of shit needs to go up in order for change to happen. But like, how we can do it without being violent and
hurting other people. Humans as a whole are fascinating and sometimes amazing and sometimes horrible creatures.
Right.
The evil we can do to each other sometimes is just shocking.
That part. I'll work on see if we can reach out to her, get you on Rogan, get more voices, because I don't ever want to be on the wrong side of history. Fucking there's still people that are, what? So
well, there's gonna be a lot of people backpedaling in the years to come, for sure. But
thank you, and thank you, Devo, for joining us, and everybody for listening. So we hope that you bitch, you enjoyed this episode. You loved every second of it. Tell all your friends.
You can fuck off.
And your family. And if you didn't, you can lick my boot. And please go buy some. This episode is brought to you by Girl Clothing. No, I'm just kidding. I actually brought a homie gave me some. I don't know where my camera is. Started a company called 𝗪𝗥𝗢𝗏. It's like methanol blue infused tallow balm, but that's going to upset all my vegan friends because I think it comes from like some part of a cow, and I don't know. It feels really nice, but I just
He didn't give us any fucking money, did he? Just give you a free sample.
But that's
this
right.
This is brought to you by Girl Clothing. Fuck the Taliban. I thought he was talking about the Taliban.
No.
Tallow balm.
Yeah, that's right. See, I told you, Australian.
He's actually he was like Taliban. Okay.
You're British, honey. It's okay. But yeah, no, support small business. Join. Janae has a gym, which I'll be going out to. I would love for you to come with me.
Make that happen.
Yeah, there's a young girl out there, an activist, Little Miss Flint. that's in your state who's been, rallying since she was like 8 years old about, clean drinking water in Flint.
Oh, yeah.
Because anyway, we could sit here all fucking day. So I'll wrap this up. Thank you for listening. We'll put Janae's information, Jim, social media handles in the show notes. And of course, you know where to find my fucking ass. And we will see.